y'all. You love him and I love him. Put your hands together.
Dolemite is my name.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Film Seizure at the Movies. I'm Geoff Arbuckle, and this week I got a movie that I've been looking forward to for a while now, and that is Dolemite Is My Name, starring Eddie Murphy. And gosh, Eddie Murphy's great in this, but I'll get to that here in just a minute. Some housekeeping. Every Wednesday, new episode of Film Seizure at filmseizure.com. You can also catch Monster Mondays with myself every Monday afternoon. You can catch that not only at filmseizure.com, but you can also go to iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher. We're at SoundCloud as well. You can subscribe there and get notified of new episodes as they come out. I also upload stuff to YouTube just in case that's, that's your thing there. So, Dolemite Is My Name, directed by Craig Brewer, who made Hustle and Flow some years back. Written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who wrote Ed Wood, The People vs. Larry Flint, Man in the Moon. They also wrote, those guys also wrote some kids movies too, which I find kind of funny. But anyway, they teamed up here to give us this kind of a biopic about the comedian Rudy Ray Moore, who played Dolemite, who embodied Dolemite in a lot of his in a lot of the movies that he was in, particularly in the 70s. I believe that he really kind of carried that persona around with him, even on stage and so forth. But so to kind of talk a little bit about Rudy Ray Moore, he makes some of the most fun blaxploitation movies you could ever watch. And the ones that I know best are Dolemite, of course, The Human Tornado, which is the sequel to Dolemite, the Disco Godfather, and Petey Wheatstraw. And he has this personality that he's kind of an insult comic. Well, not kind of. I mean, he is. And if he's not insulting the crowd, he is saying these really, really dirty jokes that are very, they're put downs is what they are. And that's, and it's, he's always kind of taken as this person who is just kind of this rude and crude person, although I don't really think that's really what he was. And I think they really try to play that up a lot in this movie. But he makes just these really fun comedy / blaxploitation action movies. Petey Wheatstraw almost borders on trying to be a little bit of horror as well as comedy. But it's it's kind of an amazing year that we're living in 2019, where we get not only a movie about Rudy Ray Moore and Dolemite, but we also get a new Shaft movie, which that's just fantastic in my book. I'm a huge fan of exploitation. I mean, if you read my blog, B-Movie Enema, on Fridays, I'm always talking about some B-movie. Oftentimes they do fall into the exploitation realm. And of course I like blaxploitation. There's just something really cool about the blaxploitation movies. And also there's something really kind of, maybe harrowing is the right word, about how, African-American folks just said, hey, screw it, we'll make our own movies. And they were able to find an audience beyond Harlem and Crenshaw and Compton and so forth. So that's really it's fascinating cinema to watch, because there is there's a togetherness about those movies that just beyond what you're seeing on screen that's always fascinated me. But Rudy Ray Moore in this is played by Eddie Murphy, and I grew up with what what most people would probably deem good Eddie Murphy, which is his stand-up just after being on Saturday Night Live, his early movies like Beverly Hills Cop, 48 Hours, Trading Places is a great one that I grew up with him and Dan Aykroyd. But, I watched his stand-up Delirious and Raw so many times that, some of those jokes are still like stuck in my head that I can't, I just can't get enough, I just can't get enough enjoyment and laughter out of. But he, after being in The Nutty Professor, he did kind of start making movies that I think were these kind of mainstream kind of dad type of roles, like where he's usually playing a dad character or something that's very kid friendly and what have you. And you really kind of miss good old fashioned Eddie Murphy, and there's no better way to bring that person back than for him to play Rudy Ray Moore. And this movie kind of talks a little bit about, and here's the thing about this movie. I don't know exactly how much of this movie is, really actually true. Much like with Ed Wood, to a certain extent, I'm sure Man on the Moon and People versus Larry Flint, there are some things that are going to be conflated, that are going to be dramatized a different way. But by all accounts, Rudy Ray Moore kind of ended up becoming kind of a self-made man. By the time this movie starts around 1970-ish, I think is when this kind of starts off. He's working at a record store, and he has cut some singles of R&B versions of country songs, really, is what he did at that time. And, he was just basically doing whatever it took for him to be famous and for him to make it in Hollywood or in LA or whatever. He's from Arkansas. He left Arkansas, got out to LA, and he just wanted to be a star. He just wanted to be famous. I don't even know if he really cared to be rich. I think he just wanted to be famous and loved. And there is a little bit of a subplot there about his upbringing and so forth in Arkansas and how much he just hated it. And he wanted to be something more. And he is kind of a self-made man in that regard as time kind of goes on. But while he's working at the record store, he's constantly having to deal with this one homeless man who constantly comes in by the name of Rico. And Rico tells a lot of jokes in rhymes. And he particularly talks about a character named Dolemite. And this is true. This is purportedly true, or at least based on things that Rudy Ray Moore had said himself, was that what he basically did was he just took those stories, kind of polished them, and made a stand-up act out of it with a character. And he hit big with that. And he was just, it's the rhythm of the way Rudy Ray Moore would say things. It's what he was saying that would just cause people to naturally just start laughing. And it's just, it rolled into this career for him. And they kind of show that in this movie a little bit. And he, basically he just creates this character of Dolemite, who's kind of a pimp, but he doesn't have any hookers. He's just kind of a surly old pimp guy. I don't think he leeches necessarily off of his aunt to fund a record with his character, because he wanted to record a comedy album, but this time record something with this new character that's kind of hit big for him. But she gives him the money to write to be able to make this album. And the album that he makes is called Eat Out More Often. and it's just a bunch of sex jokes basically. He tries to take it to a label to get it sold, and he said, you've got something you can't sell. You're telling sex jokes, you're telling things that will never get any play on radio or on TV. There's nothing you can do here. In a lot of towns, there are these very strict decency laws at the time that wouldn't allow anybody to sell anything like this. It was kind of it was a form of censorship. And it certainly was that way, particularly anything that was sexual in nature. And there were several states that had that, or several cities or towns or whatever that would have those laws in place. So he was like, all right, fine. I'll just sell it myself. And basically he presses the albums. He and his buddies put them into wrappers and stuff. And they have this rubber stamp of this devil character. And one of his friends is like, well, why is this a picture of the devil? What's up with that? And he's like, well, I want this to be something that people think is bad, something they're not supposed to have, because he kind of knows the more you try to keep people from something, the more they want it. And sure enough, he kind of starts selling it out of the trunk of his car. He's selling it under the table at the record store that he works at. And it just, suddenly, it's the biggest thing in the world. And this record company kind of comes calling, and it's like, all right, we're going to produce this album. And, he's so excited. And there's some really funny moments in this. Like, for one, he talks about, that, he can't promote it via radio. He can't promote it through the normal means that any record, whether it's music or comedy or spoken word or anything that would get promoted. He said, I'll go on the Chitlin circuit and go town to town in the South and just play black bars, basically, and black restaurants, wherever that he could get a gig. He'd just do that. But I love that he called it the Chitlin circuit. That gave me such well, it was, first of all, my immediate reaction was to crack up laughing, but then the picture that it gave me in my brain was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. But so that's what he does. He starts traveling the South, and he's selling these albums like crazy. And, he's getting noticed. People are showing up to see his show. He's about to play someplace, and I think it was in Macon, Georgia. I could be wrong, but I think this is where they said this happened. But he meets Lady Reed, who just broke up with her kind of deadbeat husband or boyfriend. They have a kid together. She's a big lady, and she's kind of distraught because it's like, oh, well, he just left me for this pretty girl, but whatever. She can have his, his lame ass and whatever. So, Rudy watched her before his act kind of beat the dude up. And then after the show, he makes a friend with her. And it's a really kind of sweet scene where he's just like, he makes her feel good. It's not a romantic thing. In fact, there is no real romantic relationship in this movie, which is really, really kind of nice. They didn't try to, when he's feeling down, he's not going to his wife, and his wife's not the one who has to pick him up. He's feeling down. He goes and talks to his friends, and his friends are a big motivation for him. It almost makes Rudy Ray Moore seem more like almost like I don't know, kind of like a local hero, just somebody that it doesn't really matter whether or not he's got a beautiful wife or a hot girlfriend, or if he's sleeping with all these women on the road. He might have done that, but in this movie, they kind of play him as more of a hero kind of character. And in particular to Lady Reed, who ultimately plays a character with him on stage, where they do some songs together, they do some raunchy jokes together, and she's always called Queen Bee, which is a character that she plays later in the Dolemite movie. So there's there's these really nice scenes with her where whenever he's kind of feeling low or whatever, he kind of goes to her, and she's the one who's like, hey, remember when we met, you were on top of the world, and to me, you still are a star, and it's little nudges like that towards directing him to continue on the path that he's on, and that's neat. That's a neat little relationship that they have there. But the movie kind of makes a turn when he and his pals go to see the movie the Front Page, which is a Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon movie, and it's supposedly a comedy. At least people are laughing in the theater at stuff, and and like he and his buddies are like, man, what the hell's going on? What is this? What is going on? Why this isn't funny? And they leave. And like one of the buddies like, yeah, man, there ain't even no titties in this. And so Rudy Ray Moore is looking at the poster, and they're like, so Rudy, what's going on? You haven't said anything. He's like, man, this movie has no titties, no funny, and no kung fu. I got to make my own movie. And so he starts down the path to make Dolemite. He goes and he hires this local community theater writer, who's played by Keegan-Michael Key, who he's always trying to tell the real struggle of the inner city and everything. So he has to tell him, he has to tell this character like what that he wants this kung fu thing. He wants a whole army of girl kung fu fighters and stuff, and and the guy, he eventually wins over the guy's Key is playing Jerry Jones, which is the guy who wrote Dolemite. He's actually in Dolemite. Eventually, he's starting to get locations. He's trying to get all the money together and everything. He sees D'Urville Martin, who ultimately directs Dolemite. It's his directorial debut, and one of only 2 movies that D'Urville Martin ever made was Dolemite. But he sees him at a strip club, and basically convinces him to work with them by making him a director. But the whole production is just, I mean, if you've ever seen Dolemite, you can understand what's probably going on in the production. You've got some people who are just happy to be working. You got some people who are in it all the way with Rudy Ray Moore. Rudy Ray Moore is paying for everything. He goes into potential horrific debt with his record label to get the money to because he keeps asking for advances on his royalties, which I mean that's a gamble, man. I mean, that is, if it doesn't work out, he will never see any money from all of the records that he makes and sells, basically. But so he eventually makes, he eventually gets everybody together. But he's got a film crew who are just students from UCLA who don't know anything, who are barely old enough to understand what it is that the movie is even about. You've got a kind of an uppity director who's worked in other movies, but he's he kind of feels like he's above everybody. And you've got the rest of the people who are just there having fun and there for Rudy's dream, basically. And it ultimately steamrolls into just this ludicrous movie that they make in Dolemite. But Dolemite is wildly successful. It went from being a movie that can't get picked up for distribution because nobody thinks that it's a for real movie. They think it's a joke. They think it's really poorly made. And to be completely and totally honest with you, it is a really shitty movie, but it is a fun movie to watch. It's one of the best bad movies I could ever recommend to somebody. But it's it goes from being something that they can't sell or they can't get distribution for. He ends up in Indianapolis, And this is something that I found really, really interesting. I don't know if there's any truth to this, but it was really cool because, I'm from Indianapolis. I live in Indianapolis, but he's on the radio station WFKK, and Chris Rock is playing the Bobby Vale, who's the DJ. And, he asks Rudy about this movie that he made. And he's like, man, I don't know if it's ever going to come out or whatever. And, he's like, man, go see, I can't remember if he says it's his uncle or his cousin or what, but he's like, he runs this theater called the Uptown. Call him up and maybe he'll play the movie. Who knows? So he goes there. The Uptown is supposedly in Indianapolis. And the guy's like, yeah, I'll play it, but it'll cost you $500. And basically you get to keep all of the ticket sales. I'll keep $500 and I keep all the popcorn sales. And he has to go out and self-promote through downtown Indianapolis. And sure enough, it goes off without a hitch. It's huge. It's, and the guy's like, man, I'm confused. It's like, I thought this was supposed to be something like Shaft or something. It's like, is this supposed to be funny? Because everybody's laughing at the stuff that's happened in the movie. And Rudy's not fazed by the laughter. And that brings up a point I want to talk about here in just a moment. But he's not fazed by the laughter. And he just looks at the guy and he's like, yeah, it's supposed to be funny. It's a joke and they're getting it. And from there, it's, somebody's looking through Variety to try to figure out, what independent movies have done something big. They find out, oh my God, this is, they sold this place out in Indianapolis, and we want to buy the movie now for distribution, and it becomes this massive hit. But a couple of things I want to talk about, because first of all, and this is most important, Eddie Murphy in this is phenomenal. As I mentioned, there is an image of Eddie Murphy that I grew up with that is funny. He's edgy. He is whip smart and quick with a joke. He's got amazing timing, and he is that Eddie Murphy again in this movie. I don't know if I'd necessarily call this a comeback as some people have. It's just this is his moment to shine in a way that I think really means something to him, because this is something that he can say, yeah, Rudy Ray Moore was one of my idols growing up. So, he's paying this wonderful tribute to this comedian that he idolized probably. So, and he plays him as this kind of, working class hero really in the black community. And it's a wonderful tribute to a very funny comedian with a very funny way of delivering jokes. And Eddie Murphy, while he doesn't necessarily look like Rudy Ray Moore, he is a little bit older than Rudy Ray Moore was at that time. I mean, Rudy Ray Moore was not a young man when he hit it big. He was in his 40s. Actually, by the time the 70s ended, I think he was already 50 or something at that point. But, he was, Eddie Murphy's a little bit older than that, but he doesn't necessarily look like Rudy Ray Moore. But I could believe him as Rudy Ray Moore because he just throws himself into this. Also, he's got an amazing supporting cast in this, particularly Keegan-Michael Key, who is this really takes himself very serious writer, and the way he talks in this, almost like he, and for a lack of a better term, he kind of whitens up this very serious black writer, and it's funny. It's a funny portrayal, but you like the guy, and he is somebody who gets on the bandwagon with Rudy, and then Wesley Snipes playing this really uppity, artsy fartsy kind of actor who's now a director, and it's just he has some lines and he has some moments when he cannot believe what it is that he's been talked into helping Rudy Ray Moore with. That is just they're just great moments. So this movie is going to be probably without a doubt one of my favorite movies of the year, without a doubt. It's going to be something that when we do our end of year wrap up, that I am definitely going to have included with that, with my other favorites, without a doubt. This movie just is amazing. I wish I had seen it. It is playing in a few places here in Indianapolis. I wish I had gone to the theater instead of just dialing it up on Netflix, because I would love to have seen this with a crowd. I got to see Shaft on opening night with half a theater of audience, and it was a fun movie to watch with a group of people. And I can only imagine this movie would have been that much more fun, with it being an out and out comedy with Eddie Murphy, somebody that by all accounts everybody pretty much likes. It's been a while since he's made a movie that everybody likes, but this one's certainly getting wonderful praise. I think it's currently sitting at like a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's amazing. And it's a movie about Dolemite. It's fantastic. But with that said, I did want to talk about one thing that I feel almost has to be compared, and that is to the movie a couple of years ago, The Disaster Artist, which kind of a self-promotion here. The Disaster Artist was the first episode of Film Seizure ever, and it's kind of funny because you think about somebody like Tommy Wiseau, who has changed his tone on what The Room was supposed to be. He was dead serious about what The Room was, and he only after hearing people laughing at it and making fun of it and what they would do for, did he change his tune about it being a comedy or written to be a dark comedy. I don't think he knows the English language well enough, or how to write a story, or how to make a movie, to understand comedy on that kind of level. I think he really did mean for that to be a serious movie. Whereas I do believe that Rudy Ray Moore really made Dolemite to be funny. I mean, he was a funny guy. I don't think he took himself too seriously, other than being in the Dolemite persona. But he is, he's very, I believe it when, the guy asks Eddie Murphy, it's like, why are people laughing? Is this supposed to be funny? I thought it was supposed to be like Shaft. It's supposed to be an action movie. It's supposed to be serious, And he's like, yeah, they get the joke, and he's just reveling in the fact that people are paying attention to him. And I think he also did not intend for Dolemite to be taken seriously. Because there's a scene when they're going to the big premiere after Dimension Pictures bought Dolemite to distribute, and they're reading reviews and they're just getting crapped on and everything, and he doesn't give a shit. He's like, oh, so what if I'm a little fat? It's like, so what if the movie is, we had fun making it, so we should be proud of it. And of course, there's just loads and loads of people outside waiting to get in to watch it. And it's like, while I sometimes doubt the exact fervor that the release of Dolemite was, I do know, because I know this, that Dolemite's a very popular movie, and it more than enough propelled Rudy Ray Moore to have an amazing rest of his life, basically. Whatever he wanted to do, whatever he wanted to sell, if there was somebody who wanted Rudy Ray Moore, it was because they loved him as Dolemite, they loved him as a comedian. So I don't think that that's conflated to, that he changed his tone, that, this movie's not supposed to be taken serious. It's a joke, and they're getting it. The audience, when you laugh at Dolemite, you get the joke. And it's like, I think that's true. I don't think he changed his tone about that. Or at least I have a hard time believing that he would have made that movie with the thought that it was supposed to be taken 100% seriously. But anyway, the other thing that I there are little things when you know a topic or when you know a subject matter very well and they make a movie about it. It's like you always find those little things when it's like, that's not exactly accurate. But I'm glad they did that in this. One of the most famous Dolemite moments is actually not in the first Dolemite movie. It's actually at the beginning of The Human Tornado, which was the second movie, where he is sleeping with the sheriff's wife. And the sheriff's a white racist. His wife's a white lady. Dolemite has sex with her. The racist cop finds out. And to basically get herself off scot-free, she says that he made her do that. And the response from Dolemite is his most famous line, and you can find it so easily on YouTube. He just shoots back at her and he's like, "Bitch, are you for real?" And they show that as if it's part of Dolemite. And I'm glad that they did, because I just wanted to see Eddie Murphy recreate that. "Bitch, are you for real?" Because that kills me. That line kills me. That whole moment, that whole beginning of The Human Tornado kills me, because he takes off running and you see Rudy Ray Moore. I mean, it's just dangling and flopping in the wind there as he's running away from the cops, butt ass naked. But I'm glad that they still included those moments, because those are Dolemite moments. They're just not in the first movie. But I didn't care. I didn't care that was, in a way, this is kind of a little bit of a fantasy, but it's a fun one. It's kind of like the Ed Wood movie, where Ed Wood probably was not as happy-go-lucky as Johnny Depp played him, and we know that the way that Martin Landau played Bela Lugosi was not really how Bela Lugosi was, but still you enjoy it and you allow it. You accept it, because it is this kind of romantic portrayal and this romantic retelling of this story. So this movie is fantastic. It is very heartwarming. It's very funny. It's very compelling. It's 2 hours long, which I'm glad that it's it's treated like a for real biopic, and I appreciate that, man. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out. If you can't see it in the movie theater, which I wish I had seen it in the movie theater, maybe if I get another opportunity to see it, I'll do it that way. But it's definitely something that's worth taking a look at. The only other note that I had here was that I'm not entirely sure if Indianapolis truly was the first place Dolemite ever played. If it is, then goddamn, that is momentous for my life to know that. That is amazing, and I really hope that is true. If it isn't, it's still nice that Indianapolis got that shout out in this movie that I liked a whole bunch. Yeah, see this movie. If you can't see it in a theater, or you don't want to pay theater prices, it's right there on Netflix already. I'm glad it is getting theater play though, but I understand why it won't get a wide release. This is something that this is when I like when Netflix or Amazon Prime just buys a movie or produces a movie and just puts it on their streaming service. So like I said at the beginning, new episodes of Film Seizure every Wednesdays, new episodes of Monster Mondays every Monday. Both of those can be found on filmseizure.com, though you can find us in other places like SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. I also upload that stuff to YouTube. On Fridays, if you have some time while you are enjoying your morning tea or coffee, you can go over to bmovieenema.com, where I write that's kind of my version of Dolemite, I guess. That's my character that I play when I want to crack some jokes about some B movies. So you can go over there, take a look at that. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Film Seizure, and you can find B Movie Enema at Film Seizure or at Facebook and Twitter also. But anyway, until next time, thanks for listening, and don't forget to save me the aisle seat.
It's always best to write what you know.
Ain't nothing to talk about in my personal life. I deal with the nightlife, club owners and mobsters and lots of pimps and kung fu.
Do you know karate?
No, but I'm a fast learner. I can learn how to chop me a motherfucker.